Yeah, I would have been 12 at that point, 12 years old. And I remember we were getting ready and doing a science unit in class and following all their preparation and getting ready to go. And they had, ever since the first mission that landed on the moon, we had kind of followed it every year when the next Apollo mission would come. And we were following that, and we got word, actually my teacher got word that the mission was in trouble.
On April 11, 1970, Apollo 13 was launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This would be the third mission intended to land on the moon and the seventh manned mission in the program.
The objectives of this mission were to inspect the surrounding region of the Fumaro crater, deploy an Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package which contained various scientific equipment used to conduct experiments, further develop human capability to work in the lunar environment, and to obtain photographs of candidate exploration sites.
The crew consisted of Captain James Arthur Lovell Jr., John Leonard Swigert Jr., and Fred Wallace Hayes Jr. Lovell had plenty of experience with spaceflight, being that this mission would have marked his fourth flight and his second trip to the moon. Swigert and Hayes were both making their first space flight and were both selected as astronauts in 1966.
You know, they were back in the 60s, and I was born in 1959. So back in the 60s, when President Kennedy came out and gave the challenge that we were going to land on the moon within 10 years, actually did less than that. But we in school, it was kind of like you guys have, and we had our sports celebrities stuff for our heroes, but the astronauts, those guys were big time heroes to us, because they're the ones that went out and did first orbit at the Earth, and started doing things in space around the Earth, and then eventually, circling the moon and coming back, and then there was the big mission to make a landing on the moon, and then they were just going to further that, land and do some other things that they hadn't done before. They were heroes, big time heroes. So all through, and the teachers capitalized on that by it was really easy to learn about space because you had heroes that were going there, learning about the moon. There wasn't a whole lot we didn't know about the phases of the moon and everything else that went around with it. So it was very important to us back then.
56 hours into the mission, the astronauts heard a pretty large bang and brief loss of electricity. What was originally thought to be a meteorite hitting them turned out to be the second oxygen tank failing and the first slowly depleting.
There would be no way for the crew to land on the moon and return to Earth safely.
A plan had to be formulated as soon as possible to get the crew back safely. Together, 5 different return to Earth plans were formulated. The plan they settled on directed the crew to orbit around the moon without power and coast its way back to Earth.
Apollo 13 ended with the crew safely landing in the Pacific Ocean on April 17, 1970. After the events of Apollo 13, it was debated and questioned whether the program would be able to continue.
They're one of the first things, just like on the failed shuttle missions when there were the disasters with the shuttle, on a couple of different occasions, they questioned, whether they should do it anymore. And although, how would the Apollo program continue, it had been largely very successful. Early on, before the Apollo program, they'd had a lot of really bad things happen. But this was the one that made them rethink about whether they were going to continue it on, because I remember when they had made it safely back to Earth, we had continued to meet, our science group did. They were talking about, well, if it doesn't continue, what's next? The shuttle was already being discussed. It just wasn't there yet. They hadn't built it. It was kind of in a prototype and planning situation. So that was still years away. I think about 1980, I believe, was the first year. It was definitely a big question. Would they continue the Apollo program because of the dangers? And what did they need to fix in order for that not to happen again? So it was to me, it was a miracle that they survived.